Okay.
See if I can wield this 10.5-foot rod around here. Okay.
That's kind of the key to this whole deal.
Look at you,
Welcome to the last cast for the 22nd of December, our last show before Christmas. And on the 3 Years Marine Tech line today, we discussed float fishing. And of course, we had some visual aids up on the forum, but it's a little more instructive, I think, to see the stuff actually set up on a casting rod, casting reel, and a spinning rod over here. So, so take it away, Duane. What do we got here, buddy?
Well, this is actually, I was fishing this this presentation yesterday, and we talked about it. Bomac float. This is a 5/8 ounce Bomac float and an inline sinker. We talked about these inline sinkers. They work so well. First of all, they're stamped with the exact weight that's on them. It takes all the guesswork out of it, right? And we're looking for an 1/8 ounce difference of less weight than what your float is rated for, if that makes sense.
Well, you're looking at total weight.
Total weight.
So if it says 5/8 ounce,
half ounce inline weight, 1/8 ounce jig, you match the float. And what you're looking for, they don't just put stripes on these floats just because it looks good. We're looking for where that rides in the water column, okay? So if my float is out there in the water and it's like that, I'm not effectively fishing that float. I want to see that thing up there in that orange-white zone. That tells me a couple things. I have the float weighted properly, and I know it's vertical because I can see that it's obviously sitting vertical in the water column. So that works well. And then you follow that up with an 1/8 ounce jig. And we talked about that that little dropper, that bead, and this is a trout bead of sorts. It really isn't weighted, but you can use those heavy beads. Accomplish the same thing. We're just tying a little dropper depending on the depth of water you're fishing. This one here is about 1 foot 14 inches underneath the jig. It hangs vertically. You want to see that present just like that. A lot of times those fish will come up and they'll see that single egg. They get attracted because of the jig, but they somehow always, Rob, they seem to find that stupid egg hanging
and we've been real reticent to even talk about this. You know, we've been doing this for a while, and now it's, you know, you're seeing it on the internet. You're seeing the tackle shops doing little demonstrations on how to rig that up. And so we thought, you know what, okay, we'll talk about this now. It's okay.
It's okay
to bring it up.
It's one of the nastiest tickets going.
It really is.
But it's a lot dependent on how you attach that dropper. And the way you've tied that is you've snelled that leader onto the shank of the hook.
Right, and there's a couple ways to do that. This the shank of this particular jig, this is a home tied jig, is nice and open, not covered up, so it was easy to tie it there. If I have a beaded jig and some feathers and things that run all the way to the end, I can actually tie that line around a little shrapnel or whatever I have wrapped on the upper end of this hook. You can also get the jig heads that have an eye on the top and the bottom.
Over the edge makes those.
Over the edge makes those, and those work really well. When you know you're going to fish that dropper, or even what we refer to as a mini or a micro jig, a little barbell headed thing on a small fly hook, you can fish that vertically underneath your main jig. All of those work well, and you use that double eye jig head for that type of presentation.
So now one of the other things you want to do with your bead is you want that about 2 to 3 inches above the hook. Okay, can you explain why you want to do that and how to? You've got a knot in here, but generally you're going to want to peg that in there,
or a wedgie,
or use a wedgie.
Use a heavy bead wedgie.
I use toothpicks in there, but
toothpicks work. I did a multi-wrap little knot. This isn't a knot in the line. This actually knot slides on here. Doesn't impact the leader at all. But the reason we do that is because when those steelhead come across this egg, to them it's an egg, and they're gonna take that thing dead center on their mouth. If that bead is sitting right on top of that hook, now you potentially, especially if you're fishing artificials later in the season for native fish, you're going to look at getting that hook buried down deep in their throat. It's going to actually lodge deep into their throat, in the side soft area of their throat or in their gill, and that's going to leave a fish that's bleeding. When we hook them up and we separate that away from that hook a little bit, they take that, it's more than likely, higher probability is going to hook them in the lip or outside the ridge of the mouth, somewhere that's not going to hurt that fish in the long run. So that's why we do that.
So that's one way of doing it, sliding float here. You can also run a fixed float, and this is kind of how we used to do it. You know, we ran dink bobbers. Boy, I got a 10.5-foot rod here trying to wield it. I'm glad there's not a ceiling fan in here. This is just your standard dink float. Now you can take these and you're supposed to wrap the line around them to get that float to hold, but with braided line, that's going to cut, if you set the hook with this thing, that's going to cut this float right in half. Okay, I've done it many times. So what you do is you take a rubber band, you run your line through one of the deals here on the float, take a rubber band, wrap it around about, I don't know, as tight as you can get it on here, and that's going to hold that float. Okay, now you can push that float up and down, it's going to hold. The nice thing about this, you can reel your float right to your rod tip, and you can use that to kind of push the float down if you want to get a little shallower. This is set up for a 1/2 ounce lead, this float here. I've got a swivel. Then this is a bait rig here, okay? I've got a cheater weight in here. This is actually a little weight here made by Bomac too. We used to actually have to drill out slinky lead, and I'd put holes in my fingers and all kinds of stuff doing that. Then we would paint them, and thankfully Bomac said, wait a minute, we can do this.
We can help you guys out a little bit.
We got people in China that will do this for you.
They'll hurt their fingers.
Now you can get these nice lids. They're powder coated. They're tough as all get out. So that keeps your bait down. And then I've just got a nice 1/0 hook here. You can run eggs. I like to run a shrimp tail on here. You can put a little tuft of yarn in there. And that works really good.
Cured tiger prawns.
Cured tiger prawn for fishing bait with a fixed float. Now the nice thing about the new floats, they're all labeled for what kind of how much weight you want underneath them. Bomac makes those little inline weights, 1/2 ounce, 1/4 ounce, and so on and so forth. So there's a couple ways of rigging up for steelhead here.
Now, the use of braid with the jigs is definitely the way to go, because with monofilament tends to sink, and you're not going to be making a straight down the current presentation. If you have anything in your presentation that's going to increase the drag of your main line, you're going to be fishing across a run, and it makes it more difficult to effectively fish that. But braid tends to float, especially if you use the old white trash floating chapstick on the last 5 or 6 feet.
Nelly.
Well, I mean, it works.
It does.
It does work.
It does work.
Yeah,
So
or just take fly floating, put it on the last 30 feet
Smelly
line.
jelly on the end of your line, whatever.
Nice to it makes it mend a little bit.
Now, when you're
easier,
talking
so.
fishing bait for steelhead and this type of presentation, you're trying to fish vertically, not drag on the bottom.
Yeah.
Reasons for putting a bait weight above your bait is because, you know, we cure up eggs, they become even more buoyant with the salts and things that you use.
Yeah,
so
neutrally buoyant at
neutrally
best.
buoyant at best.
Yeah.
And shrimp tails do not sink fast. And you know what? Them big steelhead, like we mentioned on the show, they like to hide at the top edges of these holes. And when you come in there and drop that in, you want to get in the water before you're on top of that. You want to give your presentation time to swing down and drop, and without that bait weight on there, that thing's going to kind of hover and hang and drag behind. You're going to fish right over the top of those fish.
Yeah.
You got to get it down at the top edge of the hole.
You don't want it fluttering up here. You want that thing downtown and in their wheelhouse right now. They sit along the lumber, they sit up in the choppy, bouldery stuff and that heavy cover. You want to get downtown and get right up in their mug right now.
You made the point on the show that the slowest current is actually right at the bottom. In other words, the surface current doesn't experience any drag or friction from the rocky river bed, right? But that current close to the bottom, that's where the steelies need to hide. They will not be impressed by anything whizzing over their head. You need to get it down in their face. So now all we need is some steelhead.
Yeah, now we just get a big push of steelhead.
That's all we need.
That'd be good. Okay.
All I want for Christmas is a big run of steelhead.
There are some steelhead around though. There's a few tips for you to get out this week. Hopefully catch some steelhead here. I know a lot of the Boeing folks are off this week. There'll be a lot of people hitting the rivers here in Western Washington. Get out there and catch some steelhead, and don't forget to post them up on theoutdoorline.com. For Rob Endsley, Duane Inglin, Tom Nelson, it's been the Outdoor Line last cast segment.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.